Back to read a few more chapters. When we left off earlier, Mark and Scott were making plans to build a rocket ship that they think actually could go into space. And they've started to make a list of the things that they might need, as well as talk about some of the science stuff that they might need to know how to do to make their rocket fly. Now, right now, they're at home. They've just met up with their friend Barry, who's kind of a sci-fi fan, and they're about to go out with Barry. Chapter 8. The three boys cruised around town, racing one another, shooting Russian missiles out of the sky, and popping wheelies till they were too hot and sweaty to continue. A root beer float would taste pretty good about now, Mark said as they coasted past the Dairy Queen on Pleasant Valley Way. Too bad we're still paying Dad back for the calculator, Scott said. I've got money, said Barry. You can owe me. No lie. Mark made a sharp right so Barry couldn't change his mind. The boys parked their bikes by the restaurant door and locked them together. My mom pays me to balance her checkbook, Barry explained. I knew you were good at math, Scott said as they walked inside, but I didn't know you were that good. Balancing a checkbook is arithmetic, not math, said Barry. There's a difference, Mark said. Arithmetic is just keeping track of figures like what an adding machine can do, Barry said. Math is more like a language to help you work with anything numbers describe. Scott raised his eyes to heaven. Help, he cried. I'm surrounded by know-it-alls. Mark slapped his brother on the back. You're probably good at something, and someday, if you're lucky, we'll find out what. Scott slugged his brother's arm, and Barry laughed. The root beer floats were 45 cents. Barry ordered 3 and paid for them. Then the boys sat down at a table inside so they could enjoy the air conditioning. When Barry asked about Greenwood Lake, the twins told him they'd done a lot of chores for their grandpa. Sounds brutal. Didn't you have any fun? Barry asked. We're going back next week, and then we'll have fun. We've got a project we're working on, said Mark. What project? Barry asked at the same time Scott was signaling. What gives? It's a secret. Oh, yeah, Mark responded to his brother. Never mind, he told Barry. Hey, no fair, said Barry. Didn't I just lend you guys money? He's got a point, Mark said to his brother, who was slurping the last of his melted ice cream. Plus, we're planning to tell Egg, Scott said. You've got a friend named Egg? Barry said. Weird. Worse yet, she's a girl, said Mark. Double weird, said Barry. But what's the secret? Mark and Scott took turns explaining, and they were annoyed when Barry's response was to laugh so uncontrollably that everyone else at Dairy Queen looked over to see if he was having a fit. Do you have any idea how hard that would be? Barry asked after he had calmed down. It took NASA 4 years to put a man in space, and they had millions of dollars and hundreds of scientists and engineers. That's the point, said Mark. NASA already figured out how. All we have to do is copy, same as Scott does in school. Scott ignored the insult. Barry shook his head. As my grandma would say, oy vey, you guys have a lot to learn. Listening, Scott momentarily felt like an idiot. Maybe he and his brother were crazy. Maybe they should just give up and build a go-kart. But then he had another thought. Mark and I don't know that much about math, but you do. How about if you come with us to Grandpa's and help? Hey, yeah, Mark said. Grandpa wouldn't mind, and there's plenty of room in twin territory. Barry said that sounded good, even if he didn't have a lot of confidence in Mark and Scott's project. Barry loved his brother, but Tommy's homecoming had been an adjustment for the family. Barry wouldn't mind a vacation. Chapter 9. Mark and Scott wanted to telephone Egg to make a plan for their next visit to Greenwood Lake and tell her about the project. Maybe they'd even read her the list they had made, but their parents vetoed the phone call. It's long distance and the toll charges are expensive, and you guys are still in debt, Dad said that night at dinner. So why not write her a letter? Stamps only cost 10 cents. Mark and Scott looked at one another. The only letters they ever wrote were birthday and Christmas thank you notes. How long would it take a letter to get to Greenwood Lake? Mark asked. Well, if you mail it Monday morning, it will be there on Tuesday, Dad said. I can get the address from your grandfather. But you'll have to phone him just to get it, Mark said. So in that case, why can't we just... Because I have to call Grandpa anyway, Dad said, and because I'm the one who pays the phone bill. Mom looked up from her spaghetti. Excuse me? Correction, Dad said. Your mom and I pay the phone bill, and all the other bills, too. After dinner, Scott and Mark were watching Emergency, one of their favorite shows, when Dad came into the living room and handed them a slip of paper with Jenny O'Malley's address on it. After the show was over, Scott copied the list they had made that morning onto a fresh sheet of legal paper, and Mark wrote the letter. Dear Egg, also known as Egghead, also known as Jenny. My brother and I think you might be able to help us with the project. If you're interested, I mean. We think you might be helpful because, like you said, you are an egghead. We are not. Anyway, what it is building a spaceship like a Mercury spacecraft that orbits Earth one time. We think it could blast off from somewhere around our grandpa's house and splash down in the lake. We could work on it the next time we visit Grandpa. We hope next week. Is next week okay? Our friend Barry is going to help too. He is also an egghead. Scott wrote a list of stuff we think we will need. I guess there might be more, too. It is in the envelope with this letter. There is one more thing. We don't think we should tell any grown-ups about it. Grown-ups might think this is a bad idea. However, Grandpa doesn't count. He thought of it in the first place. Do you want to work on this project with us? Yours truly, Mark Kelly. Scott made some suggestions while Mark was writing, and now he read the letter over, frowned, and suggested a P.S., which Mark added. P.S. It's okay if you don't want to. Mom mailed the letter on her way to work on Monday morning. On Tuesday, they checked the mailbox in front of their house, even though Mom and Dad both told them it was physically impossible for Egg to have answered that fast. Then on Wednesday, they checked again, and sure enough, there was a letter addressed to Mark and Scott Kelly. Egg's handwriting was not as neat as Scott's, but bigger and rounder. They were glad she hadn't used pink ink or smelly stationery. It was just a plain letter in blue ink on lined paper. Dear Mark and Scott, I would like to help you with the project. If you can come to Greenwood Lake next Wednesday and stay a few days, that would be good. We can go to the library to do research. I understand about not telling grown-ups, but I have a question. After the project is all done, would it be okay if I submitted it for the annual school science fair? In my grade, the same kid, Steve Balso, gets a blue ribbon every single year, and I am sick of it. If our spaceship works, I think that I, for once, might beat him. Sincerely, Jenny O'Malley, also known as Egg. P.S. We need a name for the project. Here is my suggestion. Project Blastoff. Project Blastoff, Mark repeated. I like it. Scott agreed. And it's okay if she wants to enter it in the science fair after we've already been to space. Mark nodded, because then no grown-up can stop us. Chapter 10. The following Wednesday morning, Mom drove Mark, Scott, and Barry to Greenwood Lake. The car had barely come to rest in Grandpa's driveway when the car doors opened, and the boys piled out and ran up the walk, shoving into each other and laughing. Nice to see you boys so enthused, Mom said as she followed them into the empty house. Grandpa's car was outside, so they knew he was around somewhere. We've got big plans for our visit, Mark told their mom. Something to do with that girl named Egg, the one you wrote to? Mom asked. Scott was afraid Mark wouldn't be able to resist bragging about the project, so he punched him. Ow, what was that for? Mark rubbed his arm. I'm not going to say anything. Secrets, huh? Mom said. The three boys climbed the ladder to twin territory and dumped their duffel bags. Not secrets exactly, Scott said. A project, Mark said. In the summer, it was always hot in the loft, so Scott turned on the fan, which kicked up a whirlwind of dust. Mom had followed them partway up the ladder and was looking over the top rung. I see one project you could do, cleaning up in here. I knew it, said Barry. The chores are starting already. Don't scare him, Mom, said Scott. Anyways, after lunch, Egg's coming over and we're going to the library, said Mark. Mom closed her eyes and shook her head. I'm sorry, there must be something wrong with my ears. For a second, I actually thought you said library. He did say library, Mark said. Mom looked from one twin to the other and then finally at Barry. What have you done to my sons? Barry laughed. Don't blame me. I think it's that girl named Egg. I'm still getting used to that idea, a girl named Egg, Mom said. Scott said, Egg explained that we have to go to the library because of the stuff we're doing. But it's one time only. Mark gripped the wooden railing at the edge of the loft, swung himself over, and dropped onto the floor. Thump, the preferred method of leaving the twin territory. Scott was right behind him. Thump. We promise it will never happen again. Barry looked doubtfully over the edge. Do I have to jump? No, but if you don't, Mark will make fun of you, Scott said. Barry sighed. Very well. He turned, grabbed the railing, closed his eyes, and jumped. Thump. Mom was climbing down the ladder when the front door swung open. Welcome, welcome. Grandpa came in carrying a paper bag filled with bell peppers from the garden. Good to see you. Anybody hungry? I've got peanut butter. With peppers? Mom said. Peanut butter goes on everything, Grandpa said. Mark and Scott introduced Grandpa to Barry. Then the sandwiches were made, and they all sat down at the table for lunch. Mom and Grandpa pronounced peanut butter and bell pepper sandwiches a culinary delight, but the three boys ate their peppers on the side. When lunch was over, Mom gave each of the twins a hug, which each twin tried to wriggle out of. Then she squeezed Barry's shoulder, said goodbye to Grandpa, and left to drive back to West Orange. Is Jenny coming over to work on the project? Grandpa asked when Mom was gone. Mark said, We call her Egg. And I call her Jenny, Grandpa said. Scott said, We're going to the library, and you don't need to make fun of us, because Mom already did. I would never make fun of you for going to the library, Grandpa said. It's a repository of all human knowledge. Yeah, that's the problem, said Mark, but we still have to go because we need to do research before we start building. Egg's mom drove up to the house a few minutes later, and Egg jumped out of the car with a grin on her face. Mark and Scott were glad to see her, too. Even though they hadn't known her long, she seemed like an old friend. "Hi, Mr. Kelly. Hi, guys," Egg greeted them. "And you must be Barry. Great to meet you." "Same," said Barry. Egg's mom, Mrs. O'Malley, rolled down the driver's side window. "I hope you don't mind that I don't get out of this car, Joe. I've got a meeting later and I need to move along. Are the kids ready?" "Do we need to bring anything?" Mark asked. "I've got it covered," Egg said. The library was in the town of West Milford, a 15-minute drive from Grandpa's house. It was quiet in the car. The boys were bursting to talk about the project, but they couldn't say anything in front of Egg's mom. "Are you having a good summer?" Mrs. O'Malley asked. "Yes, ma'am," said Mark. Scott nodded. "What have you been doing since I last saw you?" Mrs. O'Malley asked. "Nothing much, said Mark. Scott shrugged. "Jenny's been very busy," Mrs. O'Malley said. "They call me Egg," Egg explained to her mom. "It's short for Egghead. They think I'm a brain." Mrs. O'Malley laughed. "I hope that's a good thing." Scott said, "Barry's kind of a brain, too." "No, I'm not," Barry said. "So you have something in common," Mark said. "No, we don't," said Barry. Laughing, Mrs. O'Malley turned the car into a parking lot by a brick building with a flag in front. "I'll meet you here in a couple of hours," she said. A couple of hours? Mark and Scott looked at each other. In their minds, a visit to the library meant pulling one or two books off the shelf. What could possibly take such a long time? "Sounds good." Egg climbed out of the car with an empty canvas bag over her shoulder. The boys were right behind her. But wait. At the bottom of the steps that led to the library's entrance stood another kid, and now Egg was saying hello to him like they'd planned to meet all along. Scott and Mark looked at each other. Who the heck was this? All right, I'm going to stop right there, and we'll read some more later.